righty. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this space. We're going to give folks some more time to join us. My name is Ashley Singleton. I am a senior program manager with NTAC, or the National Training and Technical Assistance Center. I am zooming in from Atlanta, Georgia. ATL, where today it is gloomy and drizzly. That's all right. I'm bringing the sunshine. I am trying to bring the sunshine. I love to hear where you all are joining in from, where you're zooming in from. I see Miss Caldwell. I love that blue on your wall. That is a beautiful blue. I'm all about the colors. And thanks for joining with your video on. It's nice.
Thank you.
I love that blue. And hey there, Darla. Oh, Darla has sunflowers. Hey, Darla. I love those sunflowers. When I was a kid, I tried to grow sunflowers in our backyard and they grew. They were okay, but those look beautiful. I love it. Hey, Wisconsin, Arizona, partly cloudy in Texas. Is it hot in Texas too? Miami. I wish I could be in Miami. Hey there. Hey in Miami. Natalie in Philadelphia is so cool. Santa Rosa. I used to do some work down in Florida, Darla. I used to do some teen pregnancy prevention work in Santa Rosa County. So it's really cool to see you here. We have people from Chicago. Hey there. Anna says, hey, Darla. Did you see that? Northern California. Super excited to see so many people from all across the US and neighboring places. Let's see, who else is here? New York. Hey there, Elizabeth in New York. Super excited to see everyone. Hey, Rachel. Rachel, I saw your glasses and I was just like, yes, I love the red glasses. That's next on my list, is to get a new pair of frames, and I'm thinking red. That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, okay. All right, cool beans. All righty. Well, we have 2:02, and there's a lot that we're going to cover in a very, very short amount of time. So we're going to go ahead and get started. You are in the right place at the right time. We are talking about building trauma-resilient educational communities and schools across the nation. So if you joined us a few weeks ago, we talked about ACEs and preventing ACEs and really laid the foundation there. Today, we're going to talk more about action. How do we do the work of preventing ACEs in a school-based environment? Before we get started, I want to share with you all a disclaimer that's on the next slide here. We are recording this session, so you can come back and rewatch it as much as you like. Please know that our speakers, the words and the things that they share with them are representative of their own opinion and not necessarily the opinion or voice of our funders, SAMHSA, or the organization. Also, if something happens in this session, and on the next slide, you'll see a couple of instructions. If something happens, hopefully, knock on wood, nothing happens. But if there's something that happens, an error or issue or Zoom bombing, we will immediately close this session, and then we will send you information on how to rejoin. Also, next up, I wanted to share with you all that we are so grateful for all of our different partners that make sessions like these happen. And a special shout out to PACES Connection. PACES Connection is a nonprofit organization that has chapters all across the nation. They focus on preventing ACEs. You can join their community for free, and I'll make sure to drop their link in the chat where you can work with other folks who are trying to prevent ACEs in their part of the world as well. As we continue along in the slides, I wanted to also share with you all some of the other services that NTAC provides. We provide one-on-one technical assistance. We also have other webinars and sessions that are happening all throughout the year. So make sure that this is not your last time that you join us. You'll be in for a really great treat if you join us on other adventures. Also next up, like I said before, we're recording this event. You can get a copy of this event afterwards, and we do also provide a certificate of completion if that's something that you are looking for. All righty, so with that being said, I know I zipped through that really quickly. I want to say welcome again, and I want to pass the mic to our fabulous and wonderful speakers for today, Dana Brown and Craig Beswick. So take it away.
Hello, everybody. My name is Craig Beswick. I am the Vice President of School Development for Lifelong Learning, and spent a long time as a principal, as a regional principal, which in our world is like an assistant superintendent. Had the blessing of starting schools and the blessing of starting our trauma-resilient educational communities model with the wonderful Dana Brown, who's with me now. Dana, would you like to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. Thank you, Craig. Hello, everyone. My name is Dana Brown. I'm a fifth-generation immigrant born with unearned privilege on the land of Sauk and Meskwaki in the Midwest. And both Craig and I now reside here in San Diego on the land of the Kumeyaay Nation. Grateful to be here with all of you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I wanted to get into just looking at our purpose statement, right? We knew that we had to start something in our schools because we were seeing a preponderance of violence, of ACEs manifesting in our centers. I became aware of ACEs from Dana. She walked into my office about 10 years ago when I was starting my first school. We had a 7-hour conversation about how we were going to bring mindfulness into education. We started to talk about things like historical trauma, and that knowledge and that meeting really has led us to create our trauma-resilient educational communities model with really the goal, right? The why we exist is really to inspire people and organizations to increase resilience and ultimately improve the world, right? Lofty goal, obviously. Our mission statement is to deliver educational resources and programs dedicated to equitable and healing-centered relationships that increase resilience and overall wellness in individuals and organizations. So that's how we're trying to achieve our purpose. And the end result, right, is our vision is to cultivate a more compassionate world comprised of resilient people and their communities, where equitable and sustainable practices are commonplace within all public and private institutions and systems. So, if you look at the definition of the word TREC, it's a lofty, kind of a long, arduous journey towards a lofty goal. And we know that that's what we're on. We are on a trek to execute our purpose, mission, and vision, and hopefully to grow our imprint across the nation and across the world with like-minded individuals like yourselves. So to tee it up, we do have a little bit of an evolution video. This is our little logo here. You'll see our 2 books that are making up a heart right here. And we wanted to show you this video to give you an idea of how TREC kind of started and how it's kind of evolved to this point. So Dana is going to tee up the video for you all. Over the past 10 years, TREC has really evolved. In the beginning, we really thought that we needed to address staff. We needed to teach staff about things like self-care and compassion fatigue. We needed to teach staff about how to deal with students that were showing signs of trauma, who were emotionally activated in our centers. And as we started to train our staff, we realized that we needed to bring the same elements like PACES science, like the ability to develop resiliency skills. We needed to bring that to students.
And as we applied that, we started to notice that our students were very resilient, would respond really well to the whole process, and we wanted to incorporate more than just trauma-informed practices. A lot of times trauma-informed practices focuses just on the individual, and a lot of what we were doing was community-based, was really looking at the whole community, and also having an understanding of historical trauma, not just individual trauma. And so with that, we really moved into a space that was beyond just trauma-informed, and we were able to really focus on both the trauma that we experienced, but also our resilience in response to that trauma, both as individuals and as a community.
TREC evolution continued through the bridged wellness. There's 4 PDs: self-care and compassion fatigue, mindfulness and meditation, relationships and restorative justice practices, equity, inclusion, and cultural humility. Then they do an anonymous strengths and needs assessment. We evaluate, meet with leadership. Then we come back and do TREC practice and process with narratives, and then they start their self-study.
And what we knew is that we didn't want to hit our students over the head with the idea that they have been traumatized, right? We used to make this joke: the first rule of trauma-informed club or trauma-resilient club was don't talk about trauma-resilient club. So what we did is we framed the core science and the core content that we developed for staff, and we started to embed that into these resiliency programs in a way where students were learning things about themselves, they were developing mindfulness, they were developing and practicing resiliency skills, but we weren't overtly talking about them being traumatized. So that evolution from starting with staff to really allowing students to benefit from the same knowledge, to developing trainings that were beyond the 6 core trainings, was a really important part of the evolution. And I think another step in our evolution was becoming more data-driven. The data shows now that students involved in resiliency programs will outperform students that are not involved in resiliency programs. For a while, we were looking at schools that were becoming accredited versus schools that had not started the process. And we started to see a growth in staff morale, less leaves of absence, less sick days, more productivity. And we want to continue that evolution of being data-driven, because we know that when we can see the data improving outcomes, then more folks, more schools, more organizations will jump on the TREC bandwagon and increase our footprint towards what we really feel like is a mission towards collective impact and hopefully social change. So that was a lot in a little bit of a video, but I wanted to kind of frame it out for you just to give you an understanding of the scope and the sequence. First of all, lifelong learning, of which Dana and I support, is a charter support organization that currently supports 65,000 students, high school students a year, in 6 states. So we have over 25 schools, 22 of which are in California. We have over 85 resource centers in California that serve our students. And then we're also in Texas, South Carolina, Michigan, and Ohio, with an eye towards growing across the nation based upon the need. When you talk about our students, we really deal with the most at-promise students you can deal with, right? These are students that are many times gang impacted. 95% are eligible for free and reduced lunch, just to give you a socioeconomic lens. Our average age is 17 and a half. We are able to serve students up to the age of 24 because of our federally funded partnerships, and partnerships and MOUs are a big part of what we do in the TREC model, because we know that we have to truly develop villages around our communities where we can deliver resources that are really needed, whether that's individual resources or resources that are a little bit larger scale and community based. But our schools go through this model. All of our schools are going through this model. We are helping other social service agencies. Some of our partners go through this model as well. So really it does start with this whole idea of the acronym being trauma resilient. It used to be trauma informed this and trauma informed that. And I would do these trainings with Dana across the country, and the same thing would happen. People would line up and say, "This is amazing. I never knew about ACE science, and thank you for sharing. Just so you know, my score is an 8 out of 10. So I've been through some stuff," as they say, which I think is why I'm really attached to the work. But what would happen is people would call me back a month later, 2 months later, principals in my network, and be like, Craig, that was an amazing training about being trauma informed, but what the heck do I do now? And that was the generation of this model, saying that we can have a cogent system with a framework backed by experts from UCSD to the World Health Organization. So we can have this framework that can help individuals or schools go through it to say with fidelity and data that they are in fact trauma resilient and developing resilience in clients. So this is just a list out of the trainings, and what happens in this sequence as we develop these trainings and deliver them to staff is we also start resiliency programs for students, which we mentioned in the video. What we are excited to announce is that we are going to launch our own website in July. There will be the TREC website. It will be a fully functional website that will provide free content, but that will also, on the back end, give the ability for individuals or organizations to go through our training. Our individual training is the Trauma Resilient Professional Certification. You can see here that we go through these different, it's really 3 courses. And they are at a college level. They are all going to be offered not just on our website, but they will be offered through the University of California, San Diego, UCSD's College of Extended Studies, and they will come with continuing education units as well. In addition to these, hopefully, what you see is our beautiful badges that you can then put at the bottom of your email as well. So you can see that we have our PACES Science Advocate badge, Self-Care Practitioner, Mindfulness Facilitator, Relationship Builder, an Equity Focused Leader badge. And then when you go through the courses and attain these mini badges, these micro badges, you will receive what you see in the bottom right, which is the Trauma Resilient Professional badge. And what we are trying to do through our website, through our connections with UCSD and other large connections that we have in partnerships, is to build this network of caring, loving, helping professionals that will then transfer that knowledge through resiliency programs, through relationship building, through operating at the speed of trust with our clients and with our students. And we have resiliency programs. That's really where the rubber meets the proverbial road in working with our students. We do offer all of our students go through not just academic diagnostic assessments, but we actually created our own proprietary student wellness survey because we know that many of our students are not able to even name the emotions that are running in their background sometimes, right? So Dana started our first resiliency program 10 years ago before we had a TREC acronym and before we had all this fancy stuff. And that was called Our Souls. Students of Leadership, Empowerment, and Service. Dana, would you like to talk a little bit about that? Because it was just such a beautiful class. I'd really love for you to just talk about that, and then we can round out the resiliency program conversation and get a little bit deeper into the community stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Craig, thank you. And we weave higher education, graduate and undergraduate students in different disciplines throughout our TREC resiliency programs and throughout our entire TREC department. 10 years ago, when we started Our Souls, there was a student who had made a phone call and they were going to borrow someone's car. And down here in San Diego, there's a Coronado Bridge that there's, tragically a lot of people complete suicide, and they were going to complete suicide. And they saw a little handwritten 8.5 by 11 student had written it, "Come to Our Souls Youth Leadership." And it happened to be that very day. And they told their friend that they didn't need the car that day, and they came to Our Souls. And they were quiet for, it was like a 10-week long youth leadership. And it evolved into teaching them about, then it was ACEs science. Now it's obviously PACES science, but back then it was ACEs. And then after they learned much more about it, then they were all invited to do a service learning project with a specific aim on social justice. And this particular student did a PSA on suicide awareness and prevention. And in the development of that YouTube, they shared that Our Souls saved their life. And so we knew, Craig and I and our team knew, this is something we absolutely have to expand throughout our network for all of our students. Do you want to expand on some of our other resiliency programs, Craig?
Yeah, I'd love to. And we definitely push the envelope, right? So Our Souls, which can be construed as, oh my God, are you talking about souls or souls? What are we talking about here, right? So we kind of push the narrative a little bit further, And now that class is called SOURCE. And SOURCE stands for Students of United Respect, Consciousness, and Energy. And we are literally teaching students that they are creating their reality with every thought, word, and action that they have, right? Doesn't mean that bad things are not going to happen to good people. Doesn't mean that we want to, we always want to honor the deck or the cards that youth have been given. But by and large, everything that happens to them is a indirect relation to the choices that they make, the attitude that they have. We really are built upon having growth mindsets and teaching our students about what that means, and literally teaching students that they are painting the narrative of their life, and the paintbrush is in their hand every moment of every day. We talk a little bit about quantum physics and the idea of how we can energetically interact with others and affect them. We are trainers in heart math, if you've ever heard of Heart Math Institute. So we train our students through our resiliency programs in mini meditations that are backed by science with technology like heart rate variability monitors. And Heart Math has some great stuff along those lines in that technology. So we have, SOURCE. We have essentials of TREC mindfulness. We have SLAM, which is the synthesis of literacy and media, where our students are creating spoken word poetry, reading classical poetry, counts for English class as well, which is pretty cool. Gets that core content, core academics in there. And we have students that, I didn't know this was a thing, but we had a student three years ago that made the United States World Cup slam poetry team. Again, I had no idea that there was a World Cup of slam poetry, but to see our students get up there and talk about things that have hurt them, things that have impacted them, ways in which they are seeking to try and heal themselves and heal others. These resiliency programs are key. We have yoga for physical education, which is another big one that is really grown and blossomed. We have our HOPE program, which is helping our parenting students excel. So we have about 3% of our population at any given time that is pregnant or parenting. And we know that we need to give them the ability to teach resiliency so that they can teach it to their kids. And it's a really beautiful thing because we have child-friendly areas in each one of our resource centers where you can bring your child, right? Somebody will work with your child. And it's really cute. I've seen babies walk for the first time in those centers, which is kind of amazing. You walk in and talking to a little 2-year-old, oh, what are you doing? Oh, I'm doing homework like mommy, right? So it's like this idea that you can educate these children while they're sitting in our environments, and provide. And then there's obviously, Christmas gift giving, holiday, planning, and all this kind of stuff. Resource days where we bring in, free childcare and free diapers and resources. So the resiliency programs are really where all the science draws down into the students. And when you talk about these different elements of TREC, right, the resiliency programs, the trainings, this model that is sustainable, right? I also oversee all of our grant and fund development. And within the past 3 years, we've been able to procure over $6 million worth of monies directly related to social emotional learning, directly related to ACEs science and PACEs science. And that's a way that I think that you're seeing the universe honor, right, the need for these types of things to occur within our educational communities, within our social service agencies, hopefully within our prison systems, within HHSA, and all these other institutions that we know might need a little help in being transformed a bit. So it's really where we're starting this process of tracking data so that it can grow. Ashley, I see your hand up.
Yeah, hey there, Craig. Quick question for you. So, I'm in the South. A couple of other folks here in the room are in the South, and in some places, some of these words are taboo, like even ACEs, even talking about resiliency, or social emotional learning. Like, what types of advice would you give to the folks in the room where these words can't even be used? How did you did you run into any of that? How did you overcome it? Yeah.
My friend, I have stepped in every cow pie you can possibly step in this world, and had to, clean myself off and figure it out and moving forward. And even within our own network, there were times where we thought that this was not going to be something that we could do, right? To talk about mindfulness, right? To talk about historical trauma, to talk about the idea that if you are an African American, I can see the markers, the epigenetic markers of trauma within your DNA, right? That is fact. Now, whether they get turned on or not is in large degree how we process environmental stimuli, right? And stuff like that. But it's kind of like, I always look at Shakespeare, right? What do you say? What's in the name, right? So I remember we used to want to do an MMA class, right? Mixed martial arts, right? But you can't call it mixed martial arts. That's crazy, Craig. You're going to get sued and this and that. So we called it power fitness, right? So I think a lot of it is trying to figure out who you're working with, right? Like in Arizona right now, there's legislation now in the school boards that you can't say social emotional learning. You cannot say social emotional learning, let alone, Florida talking about, race or your who you choose as a partner, right? All that kind of stuff. So we are navigating that day by day. Our organization has hired a vice president of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we have a whole department that is based on DEI that we work very closely with. We track these things. We talk with our principals. And sometimes it's not about just the law. It's about, hey, we go really deep into this stuff. So we show you our trainings and say, is this something that your audience, your staff, your kids can digest? Because what we've learned is in the effort to change hearts and minds, you don't do it by beating people over the head with stuff, right? Or by saying like, you've got to do this because this is right. And you can't not do this. It's really, Dana always says it very beautifully. We do things with people, right? And we try and be very cognizant of what the environment is and then, kind of act accordingly. Sometimes that's just changing the names of things and still talking about it. We haven't gotten to the point yet where we've had to remove anything, but there's some scary stuff going on in this country right now. So we will keep fighting the good fight, and it's good to have people like you and organizations like NTTAC that are not afraid to say the words, as they say. So
Yeah, thank you for that. Sorry to interrupt. I was just
No,
curious.
not at all. So we could transition. Just want to make one more comment before Dana really gets into the community aspect of it. We know now that students in resiliency programs in our schools are graduating at a 17% higher rate than kids that are not involved in resiliency programs. We know that these kids are also earning 11% more credits per learning period than students that are not in resiliency programs. And then there's a lot of data emerging that was in the video around leaves of absence, staff morale, less turnover and stuff like that. And I think this beautiful model that Dana's going to talk about will really hit this whole idea of how TREC, right, and the different elements in the model, how they are actively contributing every day in preventing more ACEs, but also in helping students process the ACEs that they have already incurred, which is, and that's staff too, right? It's kind of hard when you're asking staff, like, I used to tell teachers when I'd hire them, look, think about every type of human pain that there is out there, and I guarantee you that you are going to be swimming in it. And I'm not trying to scare you, but I'm trying to tell you that my goal as a principal is to get you to understand that you have to do this work on yourself in a way, through vulnerability, through sharing your story, in order to ever develop trust and be successful with our students and our people. So just wanted to make mention of that and kick it over to Dana, who's going to talk about this beautiful slide we have right here.
Yeah, thank you so much. So this is an ecosystem cross sector, and this really spotlights what we're striving to do with really weaving and braiding services in a wraparound model, if you will, of any of our learning centers throughout California and beyond. And so Dr. Folletti in April of 2017 introduced me to Dr. Anthony R. Pico, who is a former chairman for 26 years of the Viejas Band of Kumeyaay Indians, and a chairman is like a top chief, like Sitting Bull vulnerable. And so identifying as white, and as Craig shared earlier, moving at the speed of trust, and trust takes time. We are now allies with several tribal nations. You see them lifted up in the public institutions, where the tribal nations, along with local, state, and federal government. So with our TREC mission statement, really wanting to transform individual and organizational health, we are striving to do this within all of these entities, agencies, grassroots that you see here on this social ecological model. And so we are, can transition. We last year, April of last year, Craig and Gabriel, who you saw in the TREC Evolution, our TREC director, were out at Viejas Band of Kumeyaay Indians, and we did our Foundations of PACES Science and Trauma Resilient Practices Decolonization model with them. We already weave indigenous wisdom and talking circles and medicine wheels, and many indigenous-led practices are already within the TREC model in and of itself. We are deepening that now presently as we speak, and we are indigenizing our TREC model with 2 local tribes in San Diego County, the Viejas Band of Kumeyaay Indians and Sequan Band of Kumeyaay Nation. And so doing this with them, that is our fundamental hypothesis. We don't ever do things to people, we don't ever do things for people, but rather we show up culturally humble, which is a First Nations Health Authority definition of showing up everywhere you are as a learner and listening to understand another's experience. And so we'll be indigenizing ultimately our entire TREC model. We're also weaving TREC through with Southern Indian Health Council, their positive Indian parenting curriculum, which is a train the trainer. So we're really striving to dismantle systemic racism here in San Diego County. Our San Diego County Board of Supervisors declared racism a public health crisis unanimously. And so Craig and I are leading 4 counties in our California Collective Impact Cooperative of Communities. So Craig and I will be leading the counties of Los Angeles, Riverside, San Bernardino, and San Diego, and they align. These are cooperative of communities through PACES Connection, a 12-month membership, meaning any individual living in any of these 9 counties can be part of the cooperative of communities absolutely free. And so we, the counties that Craig and I will be co-leading, align with 5 other counties in California, which are Orange, Sacramento, Sonoma, Santa Barbara, and Yolo. And so all of us collectively together, we had a launch on April 27th. I know Ashley is kind of in the know, you know, she's on our listserv, so because of her leadership nationally, can be in the know. And every single person that is engaged in this thus far is very intentional. There's so many pockets of greatness. There's pockets of greatness all over the United States, and certainly within California because of the progressiveness. And we can do this work, and we're not going to be, you know, fired or demoted, et cetera. We feel a sense of urgency that right now is the time to be talking about decolonization and truly dismantling systemic racism. Every one of you here fully know about the inequities and the disparities and the data. Ashley spoke about it at the very beginning when she opened it up. Let's do the work. Let's walk the talk, and let's really dismantle systemic racism. Craig and I and others on our TREC team are very close to Assemblymember James Ramos, who's the first Native American elected to legislation in California, only in 2018. And he authored a bill, Assembly Bill 1703, California Indian Education Act, which went into law. And however, it's unfunded and not mandated, which is very problematic. We're striving to do what we can to nurture that forward. And so what we are doing is that law is that tribes will partner with county offices of education, public schools, charter schools up and down California and rewrite history so it's proximate and it's relevant. And so we are doing that literally here with what we're doing through the TREC model, indigenizing the TREC model, and that will weave through what we're doing with California Collective Impact Cooperative communities, because we're connected with, there's 108 tribes in California. There's 18 reservations in San Diego County, more than any county in the United States. So we're doing this very thoughtfully, very intentionally, and we'd be thrilled for engagement with any of you that would like to be part of this. We're also working closely with CTIP, and that's a campaign for trauma-informed policy and practice. They are located in Washington, D.C., and you can see here clearly their objectives. So what we're striving for, because every one of us know to be sustainable, it has got to be part of policy. It has to be written in. How many of us have been part of initiatives over the years that end up being an inch deep and a mile wide because you get a new president, a new CEO, a new whoever, and if it's not written into policy and sustainable, that pendulum swings and you have to start all over. I personally don't have enough decades left to keep starting over. So the TREC path that we are on right now, we are exhilarated. This rejuvenates our why every single day, because we feel we have an opportunity in our hands and our hearts, our minds, our souls to get this right and be that microcosm, the coalition of the willing, which is how we've always done our work, is find like-minded thought leaders, like-minded visionary thinkers, leaders, and doers. Let's do this work together and truly be a microcosm of what decolonization looks like in California, starting with our 9 county cooperatives and weaving this through CTIP. Is there anything, Craig, you want to add about CTIP?
You know, I just think that it's very important to have organizations like this to support organizations. Like,
for you. Can I get a venti caramel?
oh, sorry. I really think that there are a bevy of different agencies like CTIP that are starting to sprout up across the country. And I think it's really important to align to these types of organizations because they can provide support. Like they have their own little kind of trainings that they do of how to be an advocate, how to be an ally in this work. So I think that that's important. And it really does help kind of coalesce groups like ourselves in different states, potentially nationwide, where we can start to say, well, this is what we want it to look like in schools. This is what it has to look like in justice systems. This is what it needs to look like in healthcare, right? And you start to see these things happen through organizations like CTIP. And it's interesting, right? I was asked by a state education agency, I won't say which state, but I was asked to provide some feedback on this whole idea. They were trying to develop this framework to make sure that all teachers were trauma informed. And so I started getting into the work and they said, oh, but by the way, you can't talk about historical trauma and epigenetics. And I was like, oh, okay, we're done here. Because how can you start to build legislation around being trauma informed, around ACEs science, and not honor the 5 elements of ACEs science or PACEs science, of which historical trauma and epigenetics are 2 huge parts of it. So I think organizations like this, when we coalesce around the right things, we can start to carve out a framework of what it really should look like. Honoring people like Jim Sporletter, if you've ever heard of him in Walla Walla, Washington, back in the day, creating kind of the first superintendent guide, the first kind of laws of how to become trauma informed. So as more of these kind of get out there, I think it's important to join and to really be aware of what's happening legislatively at the federal level, because that's, the federal level, that's where a lot of the money starts to flow down, that organizations like ourselves can be a part of to drive the work, right? Like the Assembly Bill Dana mentioned around Native American truth telling was not funded. Well, I can tell you that Dana and I are out there getting funding for it. We're working with Native American tribes to start to do this work, to pilot curriculum that we know is critical in truth telling. So, I really think that CTIP and other organizations out there are very important to help drive the work, especially towards legislators, right? I've tap danced in the halls of Sacramento. I've tap danced in the halls of DC. I've tap danced on both sides of the aisle. And I do think there really is, in certain regard, bipartisan support for a lot of the core elements of this. All of them, definitely not, but it's really starting to grow, and hopefully that, we can be a part of that along with CTIP and other great organizations.
So we are so grateful to have spent time with all of you here today. Thank you for your investment, and we are open to Craig and I. Ashley, any questions, thoughts? Thank you
Sure,
for the work you
and
do.
I encourage everyone to please leave your questions in the chat. We did receive a couple of them. A quick question, someone was interested in knowing where you're located in Texas. Is that some information that you all can share?
Yeah, absolutely. We are affiliated with Edgewood ISD right outside of San Antonio. So we actually have our school site on ISD's campus out in Edgewood.
Gotcha. Okay, and then TJ had a question about the genetic markers that you mentioned, Craig. So he asked, or they asked, do these genetic markers present themselves with generational and or historical trauma? And I want to invite TJ to feel free to either come off mute and expand if you like, or.
Well, I mean, I find it interesting. Hi, good afternoon. That you're able to observe some of these markers of trauma in individuals, and it's always been something on my mind. Well, are we able to? Because I know a lot of trauma, doing research, people will display acts of trauma that they've never experienced. So, especially the so-called African American community, through the 450, 500 years of trauma and abuse and stuff like that. I'm wondering if those are also able to be present, or I'm not sure how these markers are utilized or what they pick up, but do they cover this as well, or are we only seeing traumas based upon like immediate, let's say, violence or abandonment, things along that nature?
TJ, thank you so much for your question. I'm going to kick it over to Dana, who speaks about epigenetics much more cogently than I do, and hopefully try and round out the conversation with her. Dana, would you mind jumping on this one?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, TJ. Critically imperative question. So the moment that a female finds out she's pregnant, in her epigenetics, in the DNA, is all of her ancestors. And so it's hereditary. So that is historical trauma, cultural trauma, and survivance. So that would be, and none of us know where we're going to be born. We don't have a choice in where we're born wherever we are. And so when we look at nature versus nurture, and we look at the environment where we're born, and then you layer in the epigenetics, and the moment a female finds out she's pregnant, she's carrying the DNA for her children's children. There was a study done on children of Holocaust survivors, and its cumulative trauma worsened with the children of the Holocaust survivors. So the science and the research, I encourage all of you to, if you have the time, I know you're all very busy people, there's a lot of research on epigenetics. PACES Connection is certainly a great resource for it, because it's one of the tenets of positive and adverse childhood experiences. And when Craig mentioned the 5 parts and why it's so critically imperative that all of this is done holistically through the 5 parts, it's epidemiology, neurobiology, biology, epigenetics, and resilience building. That is how the thousands of hours of our team and the development of the TREC model is through that holistic lens with intentionality. So the markers can, within our DNA, that's where our environment comes in. And so it doesn't mean we're destined, just like the ACE score, we're not destined. It's a tool for helping us understand ourselves. Same thing with epigenetics. It is something we are born with. We do have the historical trauma, the cultural trauma, and survivance. We want to be strengths-based approach within ourselves. So when we look at, that's why Craig and I and our team are so intentional, the way we navigate through, because we've been training about historical trauma, systemic racism, white privilege, dominant culture for years around the nation. We lift up the data. We lift up the sources of the data behind it. What was the impact of the enslavement, as you shared, TJ, of our the enslaved African Americans, the impact of the genocide on our Native Americans, the Chinese prison camps with Executive Order 9066, the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, recruit them to come and build the Transcontinental Railroad. When it's done, enact the first public immigration law and and kick all the Chinese immigrants out. So we do it, by the time we get to equity, inclusion, and cultural humility, we are a mile deep and an inch wide. And that is with intentionality. So epigenetics is such a key component of our TREC model, because that really helps the learner really understand this starts in utero.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, it's obviously honoring and knowing that it is factual, that we can see these markers, right? I love what Dr. Anda said though after the first study, right? When I took the first quiz and I realized my score was an 8, and then they're telling me things like the difference between a 6 and a 4 is 20 years of life expectancy. That's a little shocking, right? And obviously, I had done things in my life growing up in Philadelphia that I won't mention here. We'll call them street Olympics, for lack of a better term. But I was immersed in a lot of this stuff, right? And now to know that because of the things that I've done and experienced in my life as a teenager, now my kids are 4 times more likely to become addicted to drugs or to be alcoholics, right? But what Dr. Anda said, which I think is one of the most beautiful, true statements of all this work, is what is predictable is preventable. If I know that you come to me with historical trauma, if I know that you come to me as a 3rd-generation gang member and you've lost your brother, right, and you've had a gun drawn on you, if through my trust building and my relationship building, I can learn about you, then that can help you understand what those things may have done to you, but more importantly, what things you can do through resiliency, right? And we teach kids all the time. You know, mindfulness and meditation doesn't have to be, that's great if it is, right? We're not talking about auras. We're not talking about, you know, any of this stuff. But what we are talking about is the body and how it responds to things like mindfulness over time. The idea that resiliency is a muscle that you can build through presence, right? There's a stat out there, and it's you know, it's kind of hard to lock it in, but basically the stat goes that we have, and there's you know, controversy around the amount, but imagine you had 10,000 thoughts a day, right? What a lot of people have proven is not the number of thoughts people have, because I think that varies differently, but the fact that 85% of the thoughts that adults have are either negative or redundant. Think about that, 85%. How much of your life is spent either regretting or thinking about the past, which by and large unchecked becomes depression, or you're afraid of some future potential that might happen based on a lot of fear sometimes, and that unchecked becomes anxiety. How much of our students' lives, of our clients' lives, of your lives are actually spent in the present moment, which, by the way, is literally the only thing that exists, is this moment. And now it's this moment. And now it's this moment. So I think there's a really beautiful tapestry that we've created through our resiliency programs, through our relationship building, that honors the fact that this stuff is real, but gives a pathway towards mitigating it or eliminating it. And I think that's really one of the beauties of our model and the work that we get to do every day. Sorry, I got on a little soapbox right now. I talk too much. I'm gonna be quiet.
Please don't apologize, Craig. You are dropping gems all over the place. I can't even type fast enough. Both you and Dana are just dropping gems. And I want to remind the audience right now, the group with our community right now, this is our time. This is our present moment to ask Craig and Dana, how did they get this work started? How are they doing this in their part of the world? Let's keep the questions going. This is our conversation part of the webinar. So it's not just your average webinar, right? This is our opportunity to have a conversation and be present in this moment. So I want to uplift Shayna, put a resource in the chat, a book called It Didn't Start With You. Lynn is okay in it. A couple other folks said, yeah, that's a good book to check out to talk about research on epigenetics. So that's there. And then let's see, there's another question here from Linda. Linda asked, how can we find out more about organizational training? This person works with trauma-informed care, ACEs, resilience, and it all kind of goes into ACEs work. They're also managing, they were also working for a managing entity in Florida and managing a network of providers and agencies funded by grants. So they want to know how can they find out more about organizational training. And Linda, I want to invite you to feel free to unmute if you want to add. So yeah.
First and foremost, just reach out to Dana or I. We're at the phase where, yes, we want to get our website off the ground. We want to have a bunch of free content. We want to have online groups that are around teachers or nurses or people that are in the justice system that are sharing ideas through our website. And obviously the website is also a way to receive some of the asynchronous trainings, which would be like the trauma resilient professional. But a lot of what we want to do is develop relationships with organizations, with task force, and provide more of that synchronous type training, that specialized training. So you can always reach out to Dana or I. We're always available to meet, to talk about your organization's needs, and to craft even specialized trainings if that is what needs to happen. Potentially even in places like Florida. And I saw something come through about Florida. I'm absolutely up to the task. I was born to do this work. And it's been an honor to be able to just meet people that are kind of have that same mission and vision, that same fire, right? I'm a Sicilian from Philadelphia, so I got all the fire and, I want all the smoke, as they say, especially around this type of work, because it takes fearless warriors of light to deal with some of the stuff that is presenting itself in these settings. So I will say yes, that Dana and I are definitely up to the work.
That's good to know. And yeah, Florida is a very interesting place to be trying to do this kind of work right now. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are not allowed to be put in any kind of trainings right now. So that's the kind of situation that we're working in. But it's making people like me and the, thousands of other people that I work with in mental health care, we're ready to go. We're ready to figure out a way around all of this because, being 49th in the country in mental health access is not a good place for any state to be, especially not the third largest state. So it's, we've got a big job, but I love everything that I've heard you say and really want to know more about it. And I scored 9 on the ACEs, but I practiced resilience for most of my life, one way or another. So Thank you.
Thank you, Linda, for being vulnerable and for sharing that and for doing the work in Florida. I do think that there's a way to segment the work. A lot of the attacks on this work come through the education system. So maybe there are avenues through social service agencies. Speaking a little bit out of ignorance about Florida right now, so I apologize. But the old kind of corny saying, "There's a way," I think is really true. And we can't talk about A, we can definitely talk about B, and then maybe slide in a little bit of A under the cover of night, as they say. So I do think that there is work to be done, critical work to be done. And it's going to take people like you, Linda, that have that passion and that fire to really engage with like-minded individuals, and at some point, unlike-minded individuals, to try and change the narrative.
Mm-hmm. So related to that, Dana and Craig, Stephanie wanted to ask, how are we going to keep this going, like this work, with all the changes that are happening in our country? She said Texas and Florida, but really across the country, how do we keep this work going?
Dana, you want to field that one?
Sure. Great question. We are, at least as far as our lane, our TREC lane, which has a TREC ecosystem. You saw in that one graph, that one slide that had the graph of the ecosystem. We are intentionally sustainable through at least our public charter school, which is an individualized learning model, as Craig shared, up to age 24 because of our WIOA partnership. It's written into the petition renewal that it's mandatory that they become a TREC accredited school, and it's 80% of all staff. It's not just teachers, it's front office, it's everyone, social workers, doesn't matter, the tutor, admin. So it's a sustainable cultural and organizational shift. And so then weaving through with our students, and we can see the successes with the data, with all the TREC resiliency programs with our students, at least speaking with our educational network. And then you start weaving in tribal nations. So I would just say for us, we're, I liken it to pockets of greatness all over the nation. And just like we're doing here with what we're leading with California Collective Impact, we want to have sustainable cultural policy shift, deeply rooted, that's equity focused. The work really is a mile deep and an inch wide, wherever we stand, whatever our sphere of influence is. I do believe that every one of you here, there's 102 participants, you're all leaders on the front line of systems change. And it's hard, and it's messy, and it's murky, and we're all swimming in the same water. We just call it, we try to swim parallel to shore and stay out of the riptides, because there's a lot of riptides out there, and we're very aware of what's not working, and we're only energy. So we focus our energy on what is working, and now we're building capacity and alignment with others that are doing deeply rooted equity focused work.
Yeah,
You
and
want
that's
to add, Craig?
I'm sorry, Dana, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, please share.
I just wanted to build off of that because, what started in schools, right, and started to gain traction because we have a large footprint of schools, right? So we had that ability, that gift of being large and getting larger. But what came along with that was going from 100 MOUs, memorandums of understanding with social service agencies, state institutions across the country, to now having over 500. And what we do in that is, we're very selective of who gets to come into our classrooms and work with our students, right? You better have your trauma resilient game on if you step into our centers, because if you don't love our kids the way that we have decided to love our kids, then you will not work with us. And I think that, it's along the lines of accountability, right? Even when we were doing this in schools, like teachers would take it away. We're like, oh, I can't drop that kid. That's not trauma informed. I'm like, well, that kid's been in our network for 5 months and hasn't done one class. So are you helping that student? Right. So there's this whole idea that manifested about having to have compassionate accountability as a key element, especially in the school system. Right. But then even with our social service agencies, right, we had a lot of organizations back in the day that we were working with that, quite frankly, were poverty pimps. And we knew that was not something we were going to play into. Oh, you messed up that internship. Here's another paid internship and another one. And these kids would just cycle around some of these entities getting services, but by and large, not getting any help or sustainable skill set that was going to allow them to do something different once they left our buildings or the nonprofits. So I think that was a key element of growing the work, was by making sure we were very purposeful in who we partnered with. And then really developing, like Dana mentioned in the co-ops, these settings where people could share, people could scream into the pillow if they had to, but also people could be made aware of different grants, different coalitions that were being built to write grants together, right? We don't do case management. We need great entities that can do case management in our buildings, right? Because, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's kind of hard to study if you can't eat, right? So that was really addressing the hard resources. And that's why when Dana mentioned our WIOA partners, which is Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act, federal money that comes from the Department of Labor, when we could show that a lot of our stuff was allowing these entities to hit their performance indicators, which in the grant world allows them to get more money, then it just started to build from that kind of bottom line of our kids are graduating, our kids are being more successful when they leave our centers in post-secondary institutions. Our kids are getting industry recognized job credentials. They're learning the basics of career. And it was that kind of holistic lens of resiliency that I think started to grow more of the coalition of the willing. And Dana, you haven't said your main thing. You did some water analogies, but you didn't do your one that I love so much. Now, do you want to do it, Dana?
We want to nurture, ignite a tipping point of a healing tsunami.
Yes.
Grassroots to grass tops, cross-sector in a social ecological model across the lifespan. And we're connected with other visionary doers, especially through our co-ops. And it's so gorgeous and uplifting and hopeful because there's these little pockets of greatness all over. We're going to weave them together very high level. We don't need more meetings, and we certainly don't need to meet. If we're going to meet, we need to do. And so we're just exhilarated. And Ashley, we're so grateful to you for your graciousness with inviting Craig and I to be here with every single person that is here today. This means a lot to us. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. And I know there was a question about, what are ACEs and what is the ACEs test about? And thank you so much to Rachel for dropping those links. And also just a reminder to what Dana said, the ACEs score and the ACEs test is a tool, but it's not a destiny. It's not what you're destined to be. And I appreciate Craig and Dana talking about resiliency and the programs that you all are offering in your part of the world. And so I want to remind you all that this is a part of a series. So we are talking a little bit today about what it looks like in a school-based environment. In our next session, we're going to talk about and show example of what ACEs prevention looks like in a community-based setting. Well, this is all a community-based setting, but we're kind of zeroing in on a nonprofit organization that's doing this work in a community-based setting. I'm going to drop the link in just a second for the registration for that. But we are also going to have a session on what ACEs prevention looks like from a state government-based approach. And we have some folks coming in from Georgia, from the Department of Public Health, talking about the work that they do to prevent ACEs from that lens. So we hope that you will continue to join us on our different sessions and that you really enjoy the time that we shared here today. On the next slide, you'll see a little bit more about how you can stay connected with NTAC. We also will have a post survey after this session closes. Please, 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 there are 94 people still left here. I would love to see 93 surveys submitted so we can hear and learn more about what you all are looking for training. We offer these trainings throughout the year. So let us know what you want to hear more about and we'll try to make it happen. Again, I want to say thank you all for attending and we will see you at the next ACEs session on June the 8th. Preventing ACEs, community strategies grounded in racial justice, trauma-informed care, healing, and harm reduction. Thank you. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Dana. I hope that you all have a great rest of your day.
Thank
Much
you,
love and
everybody.
light surrounding each of you. Bless you for what you do. You're touching countless lives. You're transforming futures. You're saving lives. Bless you wherever you are in this nation, truly. Thank you for who you are and what you do.
Thank you. Dana. Thank you. Thank you. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.